The morning rain drummed against the windows of Fort Hamilton's Strategic Operations Center as 13-year-old Marcus Chen Wheeler stood outside the main entrance, clutching a worn leather portfolio that contained 3 years of handwritten tactical analyses and strategic assessments that would have impressed professors at the Army War College, had they ever seen them. His slight frame and quiet demeanor gave no indication of the exceptional strategic mind that had been systematically developed through thousands of hours of study and practical application under the guidance of his late father, Colonel David Wheeler, whose death in a classified operation 2 years earlier had left a void that Marcus filled with obsessive dedication to understanding the military science his father had loved. At 13, Marcus possessed the kind of stillness that base personnel often mistook for shyness or social awkwardness, not recognizing it as the focused observation of someone who processed environmental data with the systematic precision of a trained intelligence analyst. His Asian features from his mother's side and sharp green eyes from his father's created a striking appearance that drew attention, though Marcus had learned to deflect scrutiny through deliberate invisibility that kept him on the periphery of base social dynamics. His mother, Dr. Sarah Chen, waited beside him with the patient concern of someone who understood both the importance and the potential danger of what her son was about to attempt. At 39, Sarah's expertise in quantum computing had brought her to Fort Hamilton as a civilian contractor, working on advanced simulation systems for military training. But her primary concern remained protecting Marcus from a world that might not understand or appreciate his unique cognitive abilities.
Remember what we discussed, Marcus. Some people might not understand why you want access to the strategic planning lab. They might think you're just playing games.
Marcus touched the small brass compass in his pocket, a gift from his father on his 10th birthday, engraved with coordinates that David had said would make sense when Marcus was older. The inscription read simply, "True north is found in understanding, not in following."
I understand, Mom, but Dad would have wanted me to continue developing these skills. He always said that strategic thinking was like a muscle that atrophied without exercise.
The Strategic Operations Center bustled with Monday morning activity as personnel prepared for the week's training exercises and operational planning sessions. The building's modernist architecture and high-security protocols created an atmosphere of serious purpose that Marcus had always found comforting, connecting him to something larger than his own isolated existence as a military dependent without a military parent. Inside the main briefing room, a group of officers had gathered around Brigadier General Harrison Pike, whose imposing presence and reputation for tactical brilliance had made him one of the Army's most respected strategic planners. At 52, Pike possessed the kind of institutional authority that came from 3 decades of successful operations and an unwillingness to tolerate what he perceived as civilian interference in military matters.
The problem with modern strategic training is that everyone thinks they're Clausewitz just because they've played a few video games. Real strategic planning requires years of study, practical experience, and an understanding of military culture that civilians simply don't possess.
The officers around him nodded agreement, including Major Thomas Erickson, a 34-year-old intelligence specialist, recently returned from deployment, and Captain Jennifer Walsh, 31. Whose expertise in asymmetric warfare had earned her a position on Pike's planning staff, despite her relatively junior rank. Pike's monologue was interrupted when his gaze fell upon Marcus, who had entered the briefing room with his mother to submit a formal request for access to the Strategic Planning Lab, a sophisticated simulation facility normally reserved for senior officer training and operational planning exercises.
What exactly is this? This is a restricted military facility, not a daycare center.
Marcus felt the familiar heat of embarrassment rising in his cheeks, but maintained the steady gaze his father had taught him was essential when facing institutional authority. The brass compass in his pocket seemed to grow warm against his palm, as if David's presence was offering encouragement from beyond.
General Pike, I'm Marcus Wheeler. My mother works here as a civilian contractor, and I'm requesting permission to use the Strategic Planning Lab for tactical simulation exercises.
Pike's expression shifted from annoyance to outright incredulity, as though Marcus had requested permission to pilot a nuclear submarine or command an infantry battalion. The general's thick eyebrows drew together in a scowl that had intimidated seasoned combat veterans.
The Strategic Planning Lab? That facility uses classified systems worth millions of dollars to train military officers for actual combat operations. It's not a playground for children who think they understand warfare, because they've watched some History Channel documentaries.
General Pike, Marcus has been studying military strategy and tactical planning for 3 years. His father was Colonel David Wheeler.
I don't care if his father was Napoleon Bonaparte. The Strategic Planning Lab is for qualified military personnel conducting serious training, not for civilians playing soldier. The boy has no business even being in this building, much less requesting access to classified systems.
The public dismissal created uncomfortable silence among the assembled officers, several of whom shifted nervously at Pike's harsh treatment of a military family. Major Erickson's expression suggested discomfort with his commander's approach, though he remained silent out of respect for chain of command. Marcus reached into his portfolio and withdrew a thick document that represented months of careful analysis and strategic planning that had occupied his nights and weekends since his father's death. The papers contained detailed assessments of historical battles, theoretical engagement scenarios, and tactical solutions to complex military problems that had been published in professional journals without their authors knowing a 13-year-old had solved them first.
General Pike, I prepared analyses of 17 historical engagements and developed tactical solutions for the 7 standard scenarios used in basic officer training. If you review this material, you'll see that I understand military planning at a level that justifies supervised access to training facilities.
Pike's laughter was sharp and mocking, echoing off the briefing room's walls like an artillery barrage.
You've prepared analyses, you've developed solutions. Young man, military strategy isn't something you learn from books or develop through homework assignments. It requires understanding of logistics, personnel management, political considerations, and countless variables that only come from actual experience.
Captain Lisa Reynolds had been observing from her position near the tactical display boards, her trained eye noting the serious way Marcus held himself and the professional organization of his portfolio materials. At 29, Reynolds served as the Strategic Operations Center's training coordinator, and had seen enough exceptional talent to recognize it regardless of its source.
General Pike, if the young man has prepared formal analyses, perhaps we should at least review them before dismissing his request entirely.
Captain Reynolds, I've been planning military operations since before this boy was born. I think I can recognize the difference between genuine strategic capability and childhood fantasies about warfare.
The dismissive assessment created visible tension in Marcus's expression, the first crack in his carefully maintained composure. Sarah placed a protective hand on her son's shoulder, recognizing the signs of frustration that preceded either retreat or revelation of capabilities that might attract unwanted attention.
Sir, if you won't review my written work, would you at least allow me to demonstrate my abilities through practical application? Any scenario, any parameters you choose. If I fail to meet professional standards, I'll never ask for access again.
The direct challenge from a 13-year-old boy created a moment of stunned silence as Pike processed the implications of either accepting or refusing what amounted to a public test of his judgment about civilian capabilities. The general's expression suggested someone who had just been maneuvered into a position they hadn't anticipated. Major Carl Thompson had been monitoring the exchange while reviewing the morning's training schedule. At 41, Thompson possessed extensive experience in both tactical planning and personnel evaluation that made him valuable for assessing unconventional situations that didn't fit standard military protocols.
General, if young Mr. Wheeler is willing to submit to formal evaluation, that could provide valuable data about civilian understanding of military planning concepts. We're always looking for ways to improve our training methods and public outreach.
Pike's expression hardened as he recognized that refusing Marcus's challenge would appear petty and potentially damage his reputation for fair evaluation of capabilities regardless of their source. The general's pride in his own tactical brilliance wouldn't allow him to appear afraid of being challenged by a child.
Fine, we'll conduct a formal evaluation using our standard tactical assessment scenarios. Captain Reynolds, prepare Simulation Room 3 with the basic officer qualification scenario. Let's see how long this young strategist lasts against problems that challenge trained military personnel.
Reynolds moved to implement Pike's orders while hiding her curiosity about what would happen when Marcus faced scenarios designed to test adult officers with years of theoretical study and practical experience. Something about the boy's quiet confidence suggested capabilities that extended beyond casual interest or superficial knowledge.
What are the specific parameters? Force composition, terrain conditions, mission objectives, and rules of engagement all affect tactical decisions.
The sophisticated questions drew surprised looks from several officers who had expected nervous fumbling rather than systematic preparation for complex evaluation. Pike's expression showed the first signs of uncertainty about his assumptions, though his fundamental skepticism remained unchanged.
Standard OPI for configuration. Battalion strength enemy force with integrated air defense. Your command consists of a reinforced company with limited artillery support. Mission objective is to secure and hold a strategic crossing point against superior numbers. Time limit is 30 minutes to develop and implement a tactical plan that achieves mission success with acceptable casualties.
The technical specifications would have challenged experienced officers familiar with military terminology and tactical concepts. Sarah felt her anxiety increase as she recognized that Pike had deliberately chosen a scenario that required not just strategic thinking but comprehensive understanding of military capabilities, limitations, and doctrinal approaches to complex tactical problems. Marcus absorbed the information with the same focused attention he had applied to studying his father's military manuals and after-action reports, recognizing patterns and possibilities that emerged from systematic analysis rather than intuitive understanding. The brass compass in his pocket seemed to pulse with warmth, as if David's spirit was providing guidance for the challenge ahead.
I understand the parameters. When do we begin?
As the group moved toward Simulation Room 3, Lieutenant Colonel Patricia Winters arrived at the Strategic Operations Center for her weekly review of training effectiveness and personnel development programs. At 43, Winters possessed a reputation for identifying exceptional talent in unexpected places, and had been instrumental in developing several successful officers whose capabilities had been initially overlooked by traditional evaluation methods.
Major Thompson, I'm hearing reports of unusual activity involving civilian personnel requesting access to restricted facilities. What's the situation?
Thompson quickly briefed Winters on Marcus's request and Pike's decision to conduct a formal evaluation using standard officer training scenarios. Winters' expression grew increasingly interested as she learned about the confrontation and the public nature of the upcoming demonstration.
A 13-year-old challenging Pike to tactical simulation? This should be educational for everyone involved, regardless of the outcome.
The group assembled in the observation room overlooking Simulation Room 3, where multiple displays would show Marcus's tactical decisions in real time, as he attempted to solve a problem that routinely frustrated junior officers during their initial training rotations. The sophisticated equipment and formal atmosphere created a stark contrast to Marcus's youth and civilian status. Dr. Chen watched with maternal concern as her son settled into the command chair, his small frame dwarfed by equipment designed for adult military personnel. The monitors around him displayed tactical maps, force dispositions, and real-time intelligence updates that would challenge anyone attempting to process multiple information streams while making time-critical decisions.
Remember, this scenario is designed to test tactical thinking, resource management, and adaptation under pressure. Most junior officers require multiple attempts before achieving even marginal success. We're about to see why military planning requires proper training and experience, not just enthusiasm and civilian theories.
Captain Reynolds initialized the simulation with professional efficiency, activating systems that would track every decision, movement order, and tactical adjustment Marcus made during his attempt to achieve the specified objectives. The sophisticated assessment protocols would provide objective measurement of performance that couldn't be dismissed as subjective interpretation.
Simulation active. Clock starts now.
What followed would challenge every assumption General Pike had made about civilian capabilities and the sources from which exceptional military talent could emerge. The quiet boy in the oversized chair was about to demonstrate that strategic brilliance could manifest in unexpected forms, carrying forward a family legacy of military excellence that extended far beyond what anyone in the room could have imagined. The tactical displays in Simulation Room 3 erupted with data, as Marcus Wheeler's fingers moved across the command interface with surprising fluidity, processing information streams that would have overwhelmed most adults attempting to maintain situational awareness while developing strategic solutions. The scenario's opening conditions showed his reinforced company positioned in defensive positions along a river crossing, with enemy forces massing for an assault that would begin within minutes of simulation time. General Pike watched from the observation room with the confident expectation of someone about to see their worldview validated through Marcus's inevitable failure. The complexity of managing multiple units, coordinating fire support, and maintaining tactical flexibility against a numerically superior enemy required skills that Pike believed only emerged from years of military training and practical experience. Marcus's initial movements surprised everyone observing. Instead of the defensive positioning that most officers chose when faced with superior numbers, he immediately began repositioning his forces in what appeared to be a chaotic redistribution that violated basic tactical doctrine about concentration of force and maintenance of defensive lines.
He's splitting his forces. That's exactly what you don't do when outnumbered 3-1.
Look at the positioning. He's creating overlapping fields of fire while maintaining mobility corridors. It's not chaos. It's distributed defense with integrated kill zones.
The enemy forces began their assault exactly as the scenario predicted, with mechanized infantry advancing under artillery cover toward what appeared to be Marcus's weakest positions. But as the engagement developed, observers realized that Marcus had deliberately created the appearance of weakness to channel enemy forces into predetermined kill zones, where his distributed units could engage with maximum effectiveness.
Interesting. He's using maneuver warfare principles but applied in a defensive context. That's not standard doctrine, it's innovative adaptation.
Lucky positioning won't survive sustained pressure. Wait until the enemy recognizes his dispersed deployment and concentrates force against individual positions.
But Marcus had anticipated this response. As enemy commanders began adjusting their assault to exploit his dispersed positioning, he executed a series of rapid redeployments that demonstrated understanding of military movement rates, communication delays, and the fog of war that affected enemy decision-making. His forces seemed to dance around the battlefield, always one step ahead of enemy concentration attempts. Dr. Chen watched her son with a mixture of pride and concern, recognizing the intense focus that characterized his deepest concentration. The same expression had marked David's face during his own tactical planning sessions, a similarity that made her chest tighten with bittersweet emotion.
Time check. 10 minutes elapsed. Friendly casualties at 12%, enemy casualties at 31%. Mission objectives remain secure.
The casualty ratio drew surprised murmurs from the military observers. Most officers completing this scenario for the first time averaged 25% friendly casualties by this point, with enemy losses rarely exceeding their own. Marcus was achieving results that suggested advanced understanding of force preservation and attrition warfare.
His decision cycle is extraordinary. Average response time to new threats is under 3 seconds, with accuracy rates exceeding 90% for tactical optimization.
The technical measurements confirmed what visual observation suggested. Marcus was processing battlefield information and making complex tactical decisions at a rate that matched or exceeded experienced military officers. His youth seemed irrelevant compared to the cognitive capabilities he was demonstrating through practical application. A critical moment arrived when the enemy commander, controlled by the simulation's advanced AI, recognized Marcus's strategy and launched a concentrated assault on what appeared to be his command position. The attack involved the enemy's entire reserve force in a decisive thrust, designed to achieve breakthrough and collapse Marcus's distributed defense.
Here it comes. This is where theory meets reality. He's overextended and can't concentrate force quickly enough to stop a determined assault.
But Marcus had been waiting for exactly this commitment of enemy reserves. The position under assault was a deliberate deception. His actual command element operated from a concealed location, while the apparent headquarters contained only a reinforced squad with additional communication equipment to simulate larger presence. As enemy forces committed to the assault, Marcus executed what military historians would later recognize as a classical double envelopment at the tactical level. His distributed forces converged on the attacking enemy from multiple directions, achieving local superiority despite overall numerical disadvantage. The enemy assault collapsed under coordinated fire from unexpected angles, with reserve forces trapped in a kill zone they had entered believing they were achieving breakthrough.
My God, he just executed a modified canny maneuver at company level. That's not in any manual. He developed that solution independently.
The reference to Hannibal's famous victory over Roman forces resonated with every military professional present. The tactical brilliance required to conceive and execute such a maneuver under time pressure and against adaptive opposition exceeded what most officers achieved, even after years of study and practice.
General Pike, this performance exceeds standard qualification metrics by significant margins. We need to record everything for training review.
Pike's confident demeanor had been replaced by obvious discomfort as he watched a 13-year-old civilian systematically dismantling an enemy force using tactics that demonstrated not just theoretical knowledge, but practical understanding of military operations that typically required years to develop. The simulation's climactic phase began as enemy forces attempted to reorganize after their failed assault. Marcus transitioned seamlessly from defense to limited counteroffensive, using his preserved combat power to conduct spoiling attacks that prevented enemy reorganization while maintaining security of his primary objectives.
Time check. 20 minutes elapsed. Friendly casualties at 18%. Enemy casualties at 57%. Mission objectives secure. Enemy combat effectiveness degraded below threshold for continued operations.
The announcement created stunned silence in the observation room. Marcus had not only completed the scenario successfully, but had achieved results that exceeded the performance metrics of many experienced officers. The systematic destruction of a superior enemy force while preserving his own combat power demonstrated tactical genius that transcended age or formal training. Marcus's final moves involved consolidating his positions and establishing security for the strategic crossing point that had been his primary objective. His forces maintained disciplined formations despite their victory, suggesting understanding that battlefield success required sustained vigilance rather than premature celebration.
Simulation complete. Mission objectives achieved. Final casualty ratio 21% friendly, 63% enemy. Performance rating exceptional.
The objective assessment system's use of exceptional, its highest rating category, for a first-time scenario completion by a civilian created a moment of institutional reckoning. General Pike found himself confronting evidence that directly contradicted his fundamental assumptions about military expertise and the sources from which it could emerge. Marcus removed the interface headset and turned toward the observation window with the quiet composure of someone who had simply demonstrated capabilities they knew they possessed, rather than achieving something unexpected. His expression showed neither triumph nor exhaustion, just the satisfied focus of someone who had honored their father's memory through excellent performance.
Would you like me to attempt a more challenging scenario? This one seemed designed for basic tactical principles. I've studied more complex multi-domain operations that would better demonstrate integrated strategic planning.
The casual suggestion that he found the standard officer qualification scenario insufficiently challenging created another wave of amazement through the assembled military professionals. Pike's face had turned an interesting shade of red that suggested internal struggle between institutional pride and recognition of undeniable evidence. Dr. Chen moved toward the simulation room door with obvious relief that her son had validated his capabilities without revealing the full extent of his strategic gifts, which extended far beyond what he had demonstrated in this basic scenario. She understood that attracting too much institutional attention could complicate their lives in ways that Marcus didn't fully comprehend.
General Pike, I believe we've witnessed something that warrants serious institutional consideration. Mr. Wheeler's performance suggests capabilities that could benefit military training programs if properly developed and channeled.
Before Pike could respond to what amounted to a direct challenge to his earlier dismissal, the door to the observation room opened to admit Colonel Robert Sterling, whose presence at Fort Hamilton indicated that news of Marcus's demonstration had already reached higher command levels through the informal communication networks that operated parallel to official channels. At 47, Sterling commanded the Army's Advanced Tactical Development Program, a specialized unit that identified and cultivated exceptional strategic talent for future leadership positions. His unexpected arrival suggested that Marcus's request for simulator access had intersected with existing institutional interests in ways that would reshape everyone's understanding of the morning's events.
General Pike, I understand we have a rather unusual demonstration taking place. Something about a civilian displaying exceptional tactical capabilities?
Pike found himself in the uncomfortable position of explaining how his attempt to humiliate a presumptuous child had instead revealed extraordinary strategic talent that warranted attention from specialized development programs. His response required careful balance between admitting error and maintaining command authority.
Colonel Sterling, young Mr. Wheeler requested access to our training facilities and demonstrated tactical planning capabilities that exceeded initial expectations. His performance on the standard qualification scenario achieved exceptional ratings.
Sterling studied the tactical displays that still showed the final positions from Marcus's successful engagement. His experienced eye recognizing the sophisticated understanding implicit in the force distributions and tactical geometry. His expression shifted from professional interest to genuine intrigue as he processed the implications of a 13-year-old achieving such results.
Mr. Wheeler, your tactical solution shows unusual creativity and practical understanding. Where did you develop these capabilities?
Marcus glanced at his mother before responding, seeing in her expression the careful permission to share information they had previously kept private.
My father was Colonel David Wheeler, sir. He started teaching me strategic planning when I was 7. After he died, I continued studying on my own using his materials and historical analyses.
The mention of David Wheeler created immediate recognition in Sterling's expression, though he carefully controlled his reaction to avoid revealing information that remained classified.
David Wheeler from the Strategic Intelligence Division?
Yes, sir. He said understanding strategy was the best way to prevent unnecessary casualties and achieve objectives with minimum force.
Sterling exchanged meaningful glances with Winters, both recognizing implications that extended beyond Marcus's individual capabilities into questions about family connections and inherited aptitudes that might explain exceptional strategic talent emerging without formal military training. Captain Reynolds had been reviewing the simulation data while the senior officers discussed implications and next steps. Her analysis revealed patterns that suggested capabilities beyond what Marcus had demonstrated in the basic scenario.
Colonel Sterling, the decision-making patterns show sophisticated understanding of enemy psychology and operational tempo. This isn't just tactical excellence, it's strategic thinking applied at the tactical level.
The distinction between tactical and strategic thinking resonated with military professionals who understood that true strategic genius involves seeing connections and implications that extended beyond immediate battlefield success. Marcus's age made such sophisticated understanding even more remarkable. Major Thompson approached the group with additional documentation that would provide context for understanding Marcus's capabilities within broader institutional frameworks.
Colonel Sterling, our records indicate that Colonel Wheeler was involved in several classified programs before his death. Is it possible that young Marcus received more extensive training than we're aware of?
The question touched on sensitive areas that Sterling couldn't fully address without authorization from higher headquarters. His response required careful navigation between security requirements and the obvious need to understand the source of Marcus's exceptional abilities.
Colonel Wheeler was indeed involved in specialized programs, Sterling acknowledged carefully. His expertise in unconventional strategic planning was considered unique within the intelligence community. If he passed that knowledge to his son, we may be looking at capabilities that deserve careful development.
General Pike had been processing the implications of Sterling's presence and the obvious institutional interest in Marcus's abilities. His initial dismissal now appeared not just wrong, but potentially damaging to his reputation if word spread that he had nearly prevented the military from identifying exceptional talent due to personal bias.
Colonel Sterling, Pike said, with obvious effort to sound constructive. Fort Hamilton's facilities are available for any additional evaluation or training programs you deem appropriate. We are committed to supporting talent development, regardless of its source.
The diplomatic reversal from Pike's earlier hostility didn't escape notice from the assembled officers, though everyone maintained professional courtesy rather than highlighting the general's changed position. Institutional learning sometimes required allowing senior officers to modify their stances without explicit acknowledgement of error.
Dr. Chen had been observing the growing military interest in her son with increasing concern about implications for their family's privacy and Marcus's normal childhood development. Colonel Sterling, while I appreciate the military's recognition of Marcus's abilities, he's still a 13-year-old boy who needs normal educational and social experiences. Any training programs would need to accommodate those requirements.
Sterling's response reflected understanding of parental concerns balanced against institutional interests in developing exceptional capabilities that could benefit national security. Dr. Chen, our programs are designed to supplement rather than replace normal development. We've learned that pushing young talent too hard or too fast creates problems that ultimately limit their effectiveness.
Before the discussion could continue, an encrypted communication alert sounded from Sterling's secure phone, indicating priority message traffic that required immediate attention. He stepped away to review the message, his expression growing increasingly serious as he processed information that would fundamentally alter everyone's understanding of Marcus's situation.
Dr. Chen, Sterling said carefully upon returning, I need to speak with you privately about some information regarding your husband's service record and current institutional interest in your family's situation.
The request for private discussion created obvious anxiety in Sarah's expression. Memories of similar conversations that had preceded notification of David's death, making her grip Marcus's shoulder protectively. Whatever Sterling had learned through his secure channels, it clearly involved more than simple recognition of Marcus's tactical abilities. As the morning progressed toward noon, the Strategic Operations Center had become the focus of intense institutional attention that would reshape Marcus Wheeler's future in ways that neither he nor his mother could have anticipated when they first requested simple access to training facilities. The brass compass in Marcus's pocket seemed to pulse with warmth, as if David's spirit was preparing them for revelations that would explain not just Marcus's exceptional abilities, but family secrets that had been carefully hidden for generations. Colonel Sterling led Dr. Chen and Marcus to a secure conference room within the Strategic Operations Center, his expression carrying the weight of information that would fundamentally alter their understanding of their family's military connections. The room's sophisticated electronic countermeasures ensured that whatever was discussed would remain confidential, protected from both foreign intelligence and unauthorized domestic surveillance. General Pike had attempted to follow, but Sterling's polite but firm indication that this was a classified family matter left the general standing in the corridor with his staff, processing the implications of being excluded from discussions about a civilian he had dismissed just hours earlier as unworthy of military attention. Once the secure door sealed, Sterling activated additional privacy protocols before turning to face the Chen Wheeler family with an expression that balanced professional duty with genuine human concern for the impact of what he was about to reveal.
Dr. Chen, Marcus, what I'm about to share involves classified information that affects your family directly. Colonel David Wheeler's death 2 years ago was reported as a training accident, but that was a cover story to protect ongoing operations.
Sarah's grip on Marcus's shoulder tightened as she processed implications that David's death might have involved more than the simple helicopter crash they had been told claimed his life during a routine exercise at Fort Bragg. The possibility of deception, even for security reasons, created a mixture of anger and hope that perhaps there was more to the story.
What are you saying? Are you telling me my husband's death was something other than an accident?
Sterling's response required careful navigation between security requirements and the family's right to understand the truth about David's service and sacrifice. Colonel Wheeler was killed during a classified operation in Eastern Europe, preventing the theft of strategic planning algorithms that could have compromised NATO defense strategies for the next decade. His sacrifice saved thousands of potential casualties.
Marcus felt the brass compass in his pocket grow warm as he absorbed this information about his father's true fate. The coordinates engraved on its surface suddenly seemed more significant, possibly representing something more than sentimental meaning. Perhaps a location or a code that David had left for him to eventually discover.
But there's more. The strategic planning capabilities that Colonel Wheeler possessed and which Marcus has clearly inherited have appeared in your family line for at least 4 generations that we can document.
David told me his parents were civilians, but he was first-generation military.
Sterling extracted a classified tablet from his briefcase, entering security codes that revealed documents and photographs that had been hidden in Pentagon archives for decades. The first image showed a woman in World War II-era military uniform, her features bearing unmistakable resemblance to David, and by extension to Marcus.
Major Elizabeth Wheeler, Women's Army Corps, attached to Strategic Planning Division during World War II. She developed several breakthrough tactical solutions during the North African campaign that Eisenhower himself credited with saving thousands of Allied lives. Her analytical methods were so advanced that they weren't fully understood until computer modeling validated them decades later.
Marcus stared at the photograph of his great-grandmother, recognizing in her bearing the same focused intensity that had characterized his father's approach to strategic problems. The genetic connection seemed obvious once revealed, though it had been carefully concealed through decades of classified service records.
She was killed in 1943, or at least that's what official records show. In reality, she was recruited for specialized intelligence work that required her to operate under assumed identities for the remainder of the war. Her tactical innovations were considered too valuable to risk in conventional operations.
Are you saying David knew about this family history?
Colonel Wheeler learned about his grandmother's true service record when he was recruited for advanced strategic planning programs. The capabilities he demonstrated weren't just trained, they were inherited, refined through generations of military service that selected for exceptional strategic thinking.
Before Sarah could respond to these genealogical revelations, Sterling revealed another photograph that created even more profound impact. The image showed a contemporary military officer whose features bore striking resemblance to David, though age and experience had added lines that suggested decades of challenging service.
This is Brigadier General Jonathan Wheeler, David's older brother, who was reported killed in Afghanistan in 2001.
Sarah's shocked expression reflected complete surprise at learning about a brother-in-law whose existence David had never mentioned during their entire marriage. Marcus leaned forward to study the photograph, recognizing family features that connected him to an uncle he had never known existed.
David never mentioned a brother. He told me he was an only child, that his parents died when he was young.
Sterling's expression showed understanding of the emotional impact these revelations were creating. General Wheeler survived Afghanistan, but was recruited for deep cover operations that required complete separation from his previous identity. He's been operating under assumed names for 20 years, unable to contact family or acknowledge his continued existence.
The pattern of family members being reported dead while continuing classified service created an unsettling recognition of systematic institutional practices that prioritized operational security over family connections. Marcus found himself wondering how many other military families had been similarly separated by security requirements.
Where is he now? Is he still alive?
Sterling's response would reshape their understanding of the morning's events and the institutional attention Marcus's abilities had attracted. General Wheeler currently serves as Deputy Director of Strategic Planning Integration at the Pentagon. He received reports of this morning's demonstration within minutes of its completion.
The revelation that Marcus's demonstration had been observed by an uncle he didn't know existed created layers of complexity that Sarah struggled to process. The systematic surveillance and family separation seemed to violate basic human connections in service of institutional requirements.
He's been watching us? All this time, David's brother has been alive and monitoring our family?
General Wheeler has maintained awareness of your family's welfare while being unable to establish direct contact due to security protocols. Marcus's demonstrated abilities today create justification for modifying those restrictions.
The possibility of meeting family members thought dead created emotional impacts that competed with anger about years of deception and separation. Marcus felt the brass compass in his pocket, wondering if its coordinates might somehow connect to this hidden uncle or other family secrets yet to be revealed. Lieutenant Colonel Winters knocked on the secure conference room door, entering after Sterling acknowledged her security clearance for the discussion. Her expression suggested additional information that would further complicate the family situation.
Colonel Sterling, we've received priority communications from Pentagon Strategic Planning Division. General Wheeler is en route via military transport, ETA 45 minutes. He's invoking family emergency protocols to authorize direct contact.
The announcement that Marcus would soon meet an uncle whose existence had been hidden created anticipation mixed with anxiety about the emotional complexity of such reunions. Sarah found herself caught between protecting her son from institutional manipulation and recognizing that family connections, however complicated, deserved exploration.
Additionally, we've discovered something interesting in Colonel David Wheeler's personnel files. There are references to a strategic legacy protocol that was apparently activated upon his death, with specific instructions regarding Marcus's 13th birthday.
What kind of instructions?
According to these documents, Colonel Wheeler established conditional protocols that would reveal family history and provide advanced training opportunities if Marcus demonstrated exceptional strategic capabilities before age 14.
The revelation that David had anticipated and planned for Marcus's eventual demonstration of inherited abilities suggested forethought that extended beyond simple parental concern into systematic preparation for institutional recognition and family reunification that would have been impossible without justified cause.
David knew that Marcus would inherit these abilities and would eventually need to demonstrate them to access family history and training opportunities.
Colonel Wheeler understood that exceptional strategic capabilities run in your family line, and that suppressing them would be both impossible and inadvisable. He created conditions for controlled revelation when Marcus was ready.
The sophisticated planning required to establish such protocols while maintaining operational security impressed even Sterling, who had thought he understood the full extent of David Wheeler's strategic genius. The man had apparently been playing a longer game than anyone realized, orchestrating events from beyond the grave.
Colonel Sterling, Pentagon surveillance has detected unusual interest in today's events from foreign intelligence services. Whatever Mr. Wheeler demonstrated has attracted attention beyond our own institutions.
The mention of foreign intelligence interest created immediate security concerns that transformed Marcus's situation from family matter to potential national security issue. Sterling's expression hardened as he processed implications of hostile services learning about American strategic planning capabilities embodied in a 13-year-old civilian.
Initiate Protective Protocol 7. The Chen Wheeler family is now under official military protection pending resolution of security concerns and family reunification procedures.
The formal protection order meant that Marcus and Sarah's lives had just become significantly more complicated, with military security now responsible for their safety, while intelligence services, both friendly and hostile, processed the implications of a child demonstrating strategic capabilities that could influence future military operations.
Colonel Sterling, I appreciate the security concerns, but Marcus still needs normal life experiences. He can't spend his teenage years in protective custody.
Dr. Chen, we'll work to maintain as much normalcy as possible while ensuring Marcus receives appropriate training and protection. General Wheeler's arrival will help clarify options that balance family needs with institutional interests.
As they prepared to leave the secure conference room, Marcus touched the brass compass one more time, feeling its familiar weight and wondering what additional secrets it might contain. The coordinates etched on its surface, 38.8977 degrees north, 77.0365 degrees west, suddenly registered in his strategic mind as more than random numbers.
Colonel Sterling, Marcus said with sudden recognition, these coordinates on my father's compass, they're for the Pentagon, aren't they?
Sterling examined the compass with professional interest, recognizing the precision of the coordinates and their significance. Specifically, they mark the location of the Strategic Planning Integration Office. Your father left you a map to your uncle's location, knowing that eventually you'd need to find him.
The elegant simplicity of David's plan impressed everyone present, leaving his son a physical key to finding family that institutional security had hidden, activated only when Marcus demonstrated the capabilities that would justify breaking decades of operational separation. As they emerged from the secure conference room, they found the Strategic Operations Center transformed into a hub of activity as personnel prepared for the arrival of General Jonathan Wheeler and the institutional attention that Marcus's morning demonstration had attracted. General Pike stood amid the controlled chaos, his earlier dismissiveness replaced by obvious concern about his role in nearly preventing the military from recognizing exceptional strategic talent. The morning that had begun with a simple request for simulator access had evolved into revelation of multi-generational military service, family separation for security reasons, and the emergence of strategic capabilities that would reshape Marcus Wheeler's future within frameworks that balanced individual development with institutional needs for exceptional talent. In less than an hour, Marcus would meet an uncle whose existence had been hidden behind classifications and security protocols, beginning a reunion that would connect him to family military traditions extending back generations while opening pathways to training and development that his father had orchestrated through posthumous planning that demonstrated strategic genius, extending beyond death itself. The distinctive sound of military helicopter rotors grew louder over Fort Hamilton, as General Jonathan Wheeler's transport approached the installation where his nephew had just demonstrated strategic capabilities that validated generations of family military excellence. The afternoon sun broke through the morning's rain clouds, casting dramatic shadows across the landing zone where a small group had assembled to witness a reunion 3 decades in the making. Marcus stood between his mother and Colonel Sterling, the brass compass clutched tightly in his hand as he prepared to meet an uncle whose existence had been hidden behind walls of classification and operational security. His mind processed the tactical implications of the security personnel positioned around the landing zone, automatically calculating fields of fire and defensive positions with the same analytical precision he had demonstrated in the simulation. The UH-60 Black Hawk settled onto the landing pad with practiced precision, its rotor wash creating small whirlwinds of dust and debris that security personnel shielded the waiting family from. Through the aircraft's windows, Marcus could see a figure in military dress uniform preparing to disembark, movements carrying the controlled efficiency of someone accustomed to operating in hostile environments. When General Jonathan Wheeler emerged from the helicopter, the family resemblance was immediately apparent despite 20 years of separation and the aging that covert operations had accelerated. At 49, Jonathan possessed the same sharp green eyes as his brother David, the same analytical gaze that seemed to process environmental data with computer-like efficiency. His weathered features told stories of operations in places that didn't officially exist, conducting missions that would never appear in history books. Jonathan's gaze found Marcus immediately among the assembled group, his expression shifting from professional composure to something far more vulnerable as he studied the nephew he had been watching from a distance since birth. For several seconds, uncle and nephew simply looked at each other across 20 feet of tarmac, processing the reality of family connections that had been impossible until this moment. Marcus, you look exactly like your father did at your age, but you have your grandmother Elizabeth's strategic mind.
General Wheeler, I'm honored to meet you, sir.
Call me Uncle Jonathan. We're family first, regardless of ranks or regulations.
Jonathan, David never told me he had a brother, 20 years of marriage, and he never mentioned you.
Sarah, David wanted to tell you. He fought against the security protocols every year, submitted request after request to have me declared officially dead, so at least you'd know I had existed. The intelligence community wouldn't allow it. My operational knowledge was considered too sensitive. The explanation highlighted the institutional priorities that valued operational security over family connections, treating personal relationships as acceptable casualties in service of national security objectives. Lieutenant Colonel Winters observed the family dynamics with professional interest, understanding that emotional reconciliation would be necessary before discussing Marcus's future development.
Perhaps we should continue this reunion somewhere more private. There are additional matters regarding Marcus's situation that require discussion away from potential surveillance.
General Wheeler, I want to assure you that Fort Hamilton fully supports your nephew's development. Any resources you need are at your disposal.
General Pike, I understand you initially refused Marcus access to training facilities and publicly questioned his abilities. Would you care to explain your assessment methodology?
Sir, I made assessments based on standard protocols regarding civilian access to classified facilities. Young Mr. Wheeler's capabilities exceeded any reasonable expectations based on his age and background.
His background includes 4 generations of exceptional military service, genetic predisposition to strategic thinking, and intensive training from one of the Army's most brilliant strategic planners. Perhaps your assessment protocols need revision if they can't recognize such obvious potential. The public criticism from a Pentagon general effectively ended Pike's upward career trajectory, though Jonathan's focus remained on ensuring his nephew received appropriate recognition rather than pursuing vendetta against those who had dismissed him. In the secure conference room, Jonathan began revealing information that would reshape everyone's understanding of the Wheeler family's military legacy and Marcus's potential role in continuing that tradition. He activated a classified presentation that had been prepared during his flight from Washington, showing documents and images that traced family service back to the Revolutionary War. Marcus, what I'm about to show you is known to fewer than a dozen people in the entire intelligence community. The Wheeler family has been providing strategic planning expertise to American military operations since before America officially existed. The first image showed a colonial-era document bearing the signature of a Josiah Wheeler, identified as an intelligence coordinator for General Washington's staff during the Revolutionary War. His tactical innovations had apparently contributed to several crucial victories that historians attributed to other factors, his role carefully concealed to protect ongoing intelligence operations. Every generation since has produced at least one exceptional strategic planner. The capabilities you demonstrated today aren't just inherited, they're the culmination of centuries of genetic selection and knowledge transmission.
Marcus absorbed this information with the same analytical focus he applied to tactical problems, recognizing patterns in the family history that suggested deliberate cultivation of strategic thinking across generations. Was it intentional? Did the family deliberately develop these capabilities?
Jonathan's response revealed sophisticated understanding of nature versus nurture and capability development. Both intentional and emergent, each generation recognized the strategic gifts and ensured proper training for the next. But the genetic predisposition appears to be naturally occurring, possibly linked to neurological structures that process pattern recognition and predictive analysis differently than typical human cognition.
Jonathan, are you saying Marcus's brain is structurally different? That he's neurologically unique?
Advanced imaging studies of David's brain showed unusual development in regions associated with strategic planning and pattern recognition, Jonathan confirmed, revealing medical information that had been classified beyond even Sarah's clearance as David's wife. Similar patterns appeared in my own neurological assessments and, going back further, in archived medical records of previous Wheeler family members who served in strategic planning roles. The revelation that the Wheeler family possessed measurable neurological differences that enabled their strategic capabilities created both excitement and concern about Marcus's future development. Such biological advantages would attract intense institutional interest while potentially isolating him from normal peer relationships.
Colonel Sterling had been reviewing additional classified files during the family discussion, discovering documents that added another layer to the extraordinary story of the Wheeler family's military service. General Wheeler, there's something else in the archives. References to a project legacy that was apparently connected to your grandmother, Elizabeth Wheeler.
Jonathan's expression grew more serious as he recognized references to one of the military's most classified programs. Project Legacy was an attempt to identify and cultivate families with hereditary military capabilities. It was discontinued in the 1960s due to ethical concerns, but the research formed the basis for modern talent identification programs.
And our family was part of this project?
We weren't just part of it, Jonathan revealed. The Wheeler family was the primary case study that proved hereditary transmission of strategic capabilities. Elizabeth Wheeler's exceptional planning abilities, combined with similar gifts in her descendants, demonstrated that certain military talents could be inherited and enhanced through proper training. The implications of being the focus of multi-generational military study created additional pressure on Marcus, who was already processing the weight of family legacy and institutional expectations for his future development. The brass compass in his pocket seemed heavier now, carrying not just his father's memory, but centuries of family service.
Captain Reynolds interrupted the discussion with urgent operational information that would affect the family's immediate situation. General Wheeler, Pentagon intelligence has confirmed active surveillance of this installation by at least 3 foreign intelligence services. They're aware that something significant has occurred and are attempting to identify the source of institutional attention.
Major Thompson entered the conference room with additional information that would complicate the family's situation further.
General Wheeler, we've detected attempted cyber intrusions into Fort Hamilton's training databases. Someone's trying to access the simulation recordings from Marcus's demonstration.
The sophistication required to attempt penetration of military systems suggested state-level actors with resources and motivation to acquire information about American strategic planning capabilities. Marcus had become a national security asset without choosing or fully understanding the implications of that designation.
We need to move now. Sterling, coordinate with base security for immediate relocation to Safe House 7. Thompson, ensure all records of Marcus's demonstration are transferred to Pentagon custody and removed from local systems.
As military personnel implemented Jonathan's orders with practiced efficiency, Marcus found himself at the center of institutional machinery that would reshape his entire future. The quiet boy who had simply wanted to honor his father's memory through tactical excellence had become the focus of international intelligence interest and military development programs that would demand excellence while providing opportunities beyond civilian imagination.
Uncle Jonathan, what would Dad think about all of this? About the attention and security concerns and family history being revealed?
Jonathan's expression softened as he considered his nephew's question, remembering countless conversations with David about Marcus's future and the inevitable revelation of family legacy.
Your father knew this day would come. He prepared for it, planned for it, even orchestrated some of it through the protocols Sterling discovered. David wanted you to understand your heritage and have access to training that would develop your gifts properly. But he also wanted you to have choices. These capabilities are inherited, but how you use them, whether you use them, remains your decision. The military will provide opportunities, but won't force service you don't choose freely.
The promise of choice, however constrained by security requirements and institutional interests, provided some comfort as Marcus prepared for relocation to protective custody that would separate him from the familiar surroundings of Fort Hamilton. His life had changed irrevocably in the span of a single morning, transformed from routine existence to extraordinary circumstances that connected him to centuries of family service. As the family prepared to leave for secure housing, Lieutenant Colonel Winters approached with a final piece of information that would add one more layer to the remarkable story of the Wheeler family legacy.
General Wheeler, we've received a priority communication from London. MI6 is requesting information about today's events. They claim to have relevant information about Wheeler family members who served with British intelligence during World War II.
The international dimensions of the Wheeler family story continued expanding, suggesting that strategic planning capabilities had been recognized and utilized by Allied services across generations. Marcus's demonstration had apparently triggered institutional memories and archived information that connected to his family's service in ways that transcended national boundaries.
We'll address international inquiries after securing the family. Marcus's safety and development take precedence over historical research or Allied cooperation.
As military vehicles prepared to transport the Chen Wheeler family to secure facilities, Marcus looked back at the Strategic Operations Center, where his morning demonstration had triggered cascading revelations about family, legacy, and inherited capabilities that would define his future, whether he embraced or resisted them. The brass compass in his pocket pointed steadily toward true north, its engraved coordinates now understood as more than geographic location. They represented connection to family separated by duty, legacy transmitted across generations, and future possibilities that would honor the past while creating new chapters in the Wheeler family's service to strategic excellence. The convoy rolled from Fort Hamilton, engines fading behind. Inside, the family sat in silence, absorbing the day. Escorts flanked the route, lights cutting through dust. Marcus watched the world blur past the window. Ahead, the secure compound waited, towers, fences, and calm. 6 months after the morning that transformed Marcus Wheeler from anonymous military dependent to nationally classified strategic asset, Fort Hamilton hosted the inauguration of the Advanced Strategic Development Initiative, a program designed specifically around Marcus's unique capabilities, while providing framework for identifying and cultivating similar talent throughout the military establishment. The autumn Virginia air carried the crisp clarity that Marcus had come to associate with intensive training sessions that pushed his strategic thinking to limits he hadn't known existed. At 13 and a half, he had grown 3 inches and developed the lean, muscular build that came from physical conditioning integrated with mental training, understanding that strategic brilliance required bodily endurance to sustain prolonged analytical focus. The secure compound that had become home to the Chen Wheeler family provided normalcy within constraints of protective custody, featuring educational facilities, recreational areas, and social spaces that attempted to replicate civilian experiences while maintaining security protocols that prevented foreign intelligence penetration. Marcus had adapted to the restrictions with the same analytical approach he applied to tactical problems, recognizing patterns in security procedures that allowed maximum freedom within protective boundaries. General Jonathan Wheeler observed his nephew's morning training session from the observation deck, noting the fluid way Marcus processed multiple information streams while maintaining strategic overview that synthesized tactical details into coherent operational planning. 6 months of intensive development had refined natural abilities into capabilities that exceeded even Jonathan's optimistic projections.
His cognitive processing has increased by 30%. The neural pathways associated with pattern recognition and predictive analysis show increased myelination and synaptic density.
The biological confirmation of Marcus's developing capabilities validated theoretical models about trainable genetic advantages, while raising questions about the limits of human strategic cognition. Jonathan studied the data with professional interest tempered by avuncular concern about pushing his nephew too hard or too fast.
Is there risk of burnout?
Jonathan asked, understanding that exceptional capabilities could be destroyed by excessive demands that exceeded psychological resilience.
Marcus shows remarkable psychological adaptation. His resilience actually increases under pressure, suggesting neurological structures that thrive on complex challenges rather than being overwhelmed by them.
The morning's training scenario involved a multi-domain operation requiring coordination of land, air, sea, cyber, and space assets in response to a theoretical crisis in the Pacific Theater. Marcus manipulated virtual forces with the confidence of someone who understood not just military capabilities but the human factors that influence decision-making under stress. Colonel Sterling arrived with a delegation of international observers who had been granted limited access to witness American advances in strategic talent development. The carefully selected group included representatives from allied nations whose own military excellence programs could benefit from shared knowledge while maintaining security about specific capabilities.
General Wheeler, our allied partners have requested demonstration of the initiative's training methods. Several nations are interested in establishing similar programs for talent identification and development.
Jonathan considered the request while watching Marcus execute a complex deception operation that misdirected enemy attention while achieving strategic objectives through indirect approach. The boy's understanding of psychological manipulation and operational misdirection exceeded what most military colleges taught at graduate level.
Limited demonstration only. Methods and frameworks can be shared, but Marcus's specific capabilities remain classified at the highest levels.
The international attention reflected growing recognition that strategic planning excellence could be cultivated rather than simply discovered, though the Wheeler family's genetic advantages remained unique in documented military history. Marcus had become both example and exception, demonstrating possibilities while possessing capabilities that couldn't be replicated through training alone. Dr. Chen observed the morning session from the family viewing area, her maternal pride mixed with continuing concern about the institutional pressures surrounding her son's development. 6 months of protective custody had provided safety and opportunities while constraining the normal experiences that teenagers needed for healthy psychological development.
Mrs. Chen, Marcus has requested permission to participate in the International Young Strategists competition next month. It would mean traveling to Switzerland under heavy security.
The mention of international competition created immediate maternal anxiety about exposing Marcus to potential threats, while recognizing his need for peer interaction and competitive validation beyond the artificial environment of the secure compound. Sarah understood that isolating Marcus completely would ultimately limit his development more than carefully managed exposure to broader experiences.
Who else would participate?
Exceptional strategic talents from allied nations, all under 18, competing in scenarios that test planning capabilities without revealing specific military applications. Marcus would compete as Student Delta without nationality identification or personal information that could compromise security.
The opportunity for Marcus to test his abilities against international peers while maintaining anonymity provided an acceptable compromise between development needs and security requirements. Sarah recognized that her son needed validation beyond the artificial praise of instructors invested in his success. In the primary training center, Marcus completed his morning scenario with a solution that achieved all objectives while minimizing casualties to historically low levels. His approach demonstrated not just tactical brilliance but ethical consideration of human costs that impressed observers accustomed to more callous, strategic calculations.
Scenario complete. Performance rating, revolutionary. Solution archived for doctrinal review and potential implementation in actual operational planning.
The system's use of revolutionary, a rating created specifically for Marcus after he consistently exceeded the previous maximum of exceptional, reflected capabilities that transformed understanding of what strategic planning could achieve when genetic advantage met systematic training. General Pike, who had remained at Fort Hamilton despite his diminished authority following the initial confrontation with Marcus, observed the demonstration with professional interest that had replaced his earlier dismissive attitude. 6 months of witnessing Marcus's development had fundamentally altered Pike's understanding of talent identification and the diverse sources from which military excellence could emerge.
General Wheeler, young Marcus has revolutionized our understanding of strategic planning. His solutions to standard scenarios have been incorporated into official doctrine at the Pentagon's direction.
The adoption of a 13-year-old's tactical innovations into military doctrine represented unprecedented recognition of exceptional capability regardless of source. Marcus's age had become irrelevant compared to the demonstrated effectiveness of his strategic solutions. Lieutenant Colonel Winters arrived with urgent operational information that would test Marcus's development in practical application rather than simulation.
General Wheeler, CENTCOM has requested Strategic Planning Division's assessment of an emerging situation in the Middle East. They're specifically asking if our special assets could provide alternative solutions to conventional response options.
The coded reference to Marcus as a special asset reflected his classification within military planning structures that recognized his capabilities while maintaining security about his identity and age. Real-world application of Marcus's strategic planning would validate 6 months of intensive development while creating ethical questions about using a minor's capabilities for actual military operations.
What's the situation?
Jonathan asked, understanding that Marcus's eventual transition from training to operational support was inevitable but required careful management.
Hostage situation with American citizens in a diplomatically sensitive location. Conventional rescue options carry unacceptable political costs. CENTCOM wants alternative approaches that achieve objectives without direct military intervention.
The complex parameters requiring strategic creativity rather than conventional military solutions aligned perfectly with Marcus's strengths in unconventional problem-solving and indirect approach. Jonathan recognized an opportunity to demonstrate his nephew's practical value while maintaining appropriate boundaries about direct involvement in lethal operations.
Marcus, we have a real-world planning requirement. Are you prepared to provide strategic consultation on an actual situation?
Marcus's expression shifted from training focus to operational seriousness as he recognized the significance of contributing to actual military planning rather than simulated scenarios. The brass compass in his pocket seemed to pulse with warmth, as if David's spirit was acknowledging this transition from student to contributor.
Yes, sir. What are the parameters and constraints?
As classified briefing materials were prepared in the secure planning room, Dr. Chen wrestled with the ethical implications of her son's capabilities being used for actual military operations, even in advisory capacity. The line between training and operational support was being crossed, transforming Marcus from student to participant in decisions that could affect lives.
Sarah, Marcus's solutions could save lives, both American hostages and military personnel who would otherwise be risked in conventional rescue operations. His capabilities come with obligations to use them responsibly.
The ethical framework of obligation accompanying capability resonated with Sarah's understanding of the Wheeler family legacy, though maternal protectiveness remained paramount.
He's 13 years old, Jonathan. Whatever his capabilities, he's still a child who shouldn't bear responsibility for life and death decisions.
Which is why his role remains advisory only. Marcus provides strategic options that professional military officers evaluate and potentially implement. He's not making final decisions or bearing ultimate responsibility for outcomes.
The distinction between advisory input and decision-making authority provided some comfort, though Sarah understood that Marcus's strategic solutions would inevitably influence operations regardless of formal responsibility structures. Her son had entered a world where capability created obligation regardless of age or preference. In the secure planning room, Marcus absorbed classified briefing materials with the rapid processing that characterized his analytical cognition. The hostage situation's complexity, involving multiple national interests, terrorist groups with conflicting agendas, and diplomatic constraints that prevented conventional military response, required exactly the kind of creative strategic thinking that distinguished Marcus from traditional planners.
Standard rescue operations would require violating sovereign airspace and conducting ground operations in urban terrain. Political costs include potential collapse of regional alliance structures and propaganda victories for hostile actors.
Marcus studied the tactical geography and force dispositions with the same focus he had applied to historical battles and simulated scenarios. Patterns emerged from the complexity, suggesting solutions that operated outside conventional military paradigms.
What about indirect approach through economic and information operations? If we can't use military force directly, we need to create conditions where the hostage takers release prisoners for their own advantage rather than through coercion.
The sophisticated understanding of psychological operations and strategic misdirection impressed the assembled military professionals, who recognized innovative thinking that escaped conventional planning constraints.
We create the appearance of preparing for conventional assault while actually implementing economic strangleholds on the terrorist funding networks. Simultaneously, we conduct information operations that create dissension within terrorist ranks about the wisdom of holding American hostages. The goal is to make releasing hostages seem like their idea rather than capitulation to American demands.
Colonel Sterling studied Marcus's developing plan with professional amazement at the sophisticated integration of multiple strategic tools into coherent operational approach.
This is graduate-level strategic planning that most War College students wouldn't conceive. The indirect approach minimizes risk while maximizing probability of success.
As Marcus continued developing his strategic solution, observers recognized they were witnessing the emergence of a strategic mind that could revolutionize American military planning if properly developed and protected. The Wheeler family legacy was manifesting in its most powerful iteration, combining genetic advantage with systematic training and technological capabilities that previous generations couldn't have imagined. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Fort Hamilton as Marcus completed his strategic assessment, providing CENTCOM with unconventional solutions that would be evaluated, modified, and potentially implemented by professional military officers who would never know a 13-year-old boy had conceived their operational approach.
Exceptional work. Your solution demonstrates understanding that transcends tactical excellence into genuine strategic wisdom. Your father would be extraordinarily proud.
Marcus touched the brass compass in his pocket, feeling connection to the father whose death had catalyzed the revelation of family legacy and exceptional capabilities that would define his future. The coordinates engraved on its surface no longer pointed to a physical location, but to a destiny that connected past service with future contribution to strategic excellence that protected American interests and saved lives through brilliant planning rather than battlefield courage. As the day concluded with formal documentation of Marcus's strategic consultation and its classification at levels that would prevent public knowledge of a teenager's contribution to national security, the Chen Wheeler family returned to their secure quarters with understanding that their lives had permanently changed. Marcus's capabilities had been validated through practical application, creating institutional investment in his continued development that would provide opportunities and constraints in equal measure. The International Young Strategist competition loomed as the next test of Marcus's abilities, offering chance to measure his capabilities against global peers while maintaining security that protected him from those who would exploit or eliminate strategic advantages that genetic inheritance and systematic training had created. Dr. Chen watched her son review the day's activities with the focused intensity that characterized his approach to continuous improvement. The boy who had simply wanted to honor his father's memory had become a national strategic asset whose capabilities could influence military operations and save lives through planning brilliance that transcended age or conventional expectations. The brass compass pointed steadily toward true north, its symbolic meaning now clear. Marcus Wheeler would navigate by principles of service and excellence that honored family legacy, while creating new chapters in strategic military planning that protected those who depended on American military superiority for their freedom and security. One month later, the International Conference Center in Geneva, Switzerland, hosted the 5th annual Young Strategists competition. Though none of the public attendees realized that this year's gathering included the most closely guarded strategic asset in American military planning. Marcus Wheeler, competing as Student Delta from Alliance Nation 4, sat among 37 exceptional young minds from around the world, each representing their nation's investment in cultivating strategic excellence for future generations. The conference hall's soaring glass architecture created an atmosphere of transparent competition, though Marcus understood that real strategic planning occurred in shadows where true capabilities remained carefully concealed. His security detail, disguised as conference staff and fellow attendees, maintained protective surveillance while appearing to be ordinary participants in an academic exercise. General Jonathan Wheeler observed from the VIP section alongside military attachés from allied nations, each studying the competition for signs of emerging strategic talent that might influence future military balance. The public nature of the competition required careful calibration, demonstrating enough capability to validate training programs while concealing revolutionary advantages that could compromise operational security. The competition's final scenario had been designed by a consortium of military academies to test strategic thinking under extreme constraints, a humanitarian crisis complicated by military insurgency, international legal restrictions, and environmental disasters that created cascading challenges requiring integrated solutions. Most participants would achieve partial success at best, demonstrating competence in individual aspects while failing to synthesize comprehensive strategic responses. Marcus studied the scenario parameters with the same analytical intensity he had applied to real-world consultation the previous month, recognizing patterns that connected seemingly disparate challenges into unified strategic problems. His competitors, brilliant young minds from Britain, Israel, South Korea, Germany, and other allied nations, attacked the problem with conventional excellence that would have impressed any military academy. But Marcus saw beyond conventional excellence into revolutionary synthesis that transformed multiple problems into mutual solutions. Where others saw humanitarian crisis competing with military objectives for resources, Marcus recognized opportunity to use refugee movements as intelligence-gathering networks. Where others saw environmental disaster as operational constraint, Marcus identified ways to use natural barriers to channel enemy forces into predetermined engagement zones.
Competitor Delta's approach is unusual. He's treating the entire scenario as an interconnected system, rather than separate challenges requiring individual responses.
The holistic approach reflected Marcus's neurological advantages, the ability to process multiple data streams simultaneously while maintaining strategic overview that synthesized tactical details into operational coherence. His competitors worked brilliantly within conventional paradigms, while Marcus operated outside traditional constraints. Dr. Chen watched from the secured family viewing area, her maternal pride mixed with continuing concern about the international attention Marcus's performance would attract even with his identity concealed. The other competitors were remarkable, future military leaders whose strategic thinking would influence their nation's security for decades. But Marcus operated at a different level entirely. As the competition clock counted down final minutes, Marcus implemented solution elements that demonstrated understanding beyond his years or training. His response to the humanitarian crisis created self-sustaining refugee support systems that gathered intelligence while providing genuine assistance. His military strategy used minimum force to achieve maximum psychological impact, causing insurgent forces to defeat themselves through internal conflicts his information operations created. His environmental adaptations turned disasters into tactical advantages that protected civilian populations while degrading enemy capabilities.
Time. Solutions will now be evaluated by our panel of international strategic planning experts.
The evaluation process involves sophisticated AI systems and human experts analyzing each solution for feasibility, innovation, resource efficiency, casualty minimization, and strategic effectiveness. Most competitors achieved scores between 70 and 85%, exceptional by any standard but within normal ranges for highly talented strategic planners. Marcus's solution achieved something unprecedented in competition history. A perfect score with additional commendation for revolutionary innovation in strategic synthesis. The evaluation panel, unaware of his identity but recognizing exceptional capability, requested permission to archive his solution for study at military academies worldwide.
Who is Student Delta? That solution demonstrates strategic understanding that exceeds most general officers I've served with.
The competition maintains participant anonymity to prevent political influence on evaluation. Student Delta's identity remains classified by their sponsoring nation.
The award ceremony proceeded with diplomatic precision that honored all participants while acknowledging the extraordinary achievement of the anonymous American student whose strategic brilliance had transformed understanding of what young minds could achieve with proper cultivation. Marcus accepted his award with quiet dignity that revealed nothing of his identity or the family legacy of strategic excellence he represented. As the competition concluded and participants began departing for their home nations, a small incident occurred that would later be recognized as significant. A young woman from the Russian observation team approached Marcus during the reception, her movements suggesting intelligence training despite her academic cover.
Your solution was brilliant. Perhaps we could discuss strategic philosophy before you leave?
Marcus's security detail tensed as the woman clearly attempted to gather intelligence about the mysterious student Delta, whose capabilities had impressed even seasoned strategic planners. But Marcus handled the approach with the same analytical precision he applied to tactical problems.
Strategic philosophy is best discussed through demonstrated application rather than theoretical conversation. Perhaps future competitions will provide additional opportunities for such demonstrations.
The deflection was sophisticated enough that the Russian operative recognized she was dealing with someone trained in intelligence protocols despite his apparent youth. She withdrew with professional respect for an adversary whose capabilities demanded acknowledgement regardless of age or nationality. Later, in the secure transport returning to American military facilities, Jonathan debriefed his nephew on the competition and its implications for future development.
You've demonstrated capabilities that validate every investment in your training, but also attracted attention that creates new security concerns. How do you feel about the experience?
Marcus considered the question while absently turning the brass compass that never left his possession.
I felt connected to something larger than individual achievement. Every strategic solution I developed could save lives. American and allied forces, civilian populations, even enemy combatants who might surrender rather than die in conventional operations. Is this what Dad felt when he planned operations?
David understood that strategic brilliance in planning prevented tactical tragedy in execution, Jonathan confirmed. Your capabilities honor his memory while exceeding anything he could have imagined. The Wheeler family legacy continues through you, but you're not bound by it. These abilities are tools you can choose to use or set aside.
I choose to use them, Marcus said with quiet certainty that reflected months of contemplation about duty, capability, and the obligations that accompanied inherited advantages. Not because of family legacy or institutional pressure, but because I can contribute something unique that protects people who need protection.
Dr. Chen listened to her son's mature reasoning with maternal pride tempered by understanding that his choice, however freely made, would constrain his future in ways that normal teenagers never experienced. The protective custody, security protocols, and institutional attention would continue throughout his development, and probably his entire life. 6 months earlier, General Pike had dismissed Marcus Wheeler as a child playing at understanding warfare. Now, military academies worldwide would study his strategic solutions without knowing a 13-year-old had conceived approaches that revolutionized understanding of integrated operational planning. The brass compass pointed toward true north, not geographic direction but moral orientation toward service that transcended personal preference. Marcus Wheeler had validated generations of family military excellence while establishing his own identity as potentially the greatest strategic mind of his generation. As their aircraft approached American airspace, Marcus opened his planning notebook and began sketching solutions to theoretical scenarios that might become tomorrow's operational requirements. The quiet boy who had simply wanted to honor his father's memory had become a strategic asset whose brilliance would influence military planning for decades, protecting American interests and saving lives through intellectual excellence that transformed warfare from brutal necessity into precise application of minimum force for maximum effect. The Wheeler family legacy would continue, refined and amplified through Marcus's unique capabilities, serving purposes larger than individual achievement or institutional recognition. The morning at Fort Hamilton that had begun with General Pike's dismissive laughter had catalyzed revelations, reunions, and recognitions that connected past service with future contribution to strategic excellence that protected freedom through brilliance rather than brutality. True North remained constant, service to others through capabilities that genetic inheritance and systematic training had created, guided by principles that David Wheeler had encoded in brass and coordinates, now carried forward by a son whose strategic genius would honor that legacy while exceeding its highest aspirations. The future stretched ahead with challenges that would require every aspect of Marcus's developing capabilities, but also with opportunities to contribute to human security through strategic planning that prevented conflicts, minimized casualties, and achieved objectives through intellectual excellence rather than overwhelming force. Marcus Wheeler, age 13 and a half, strategic planning prodigy and heir to centuries of military excellence, looked toward that future with quiet confidence that whatever challenges emerged, he would meet them with the same analytical precision and ethical consideration that had already revolutionized understanding of what strategic brilliance could achieve. The brass compass pointed the way forward, true north always clear regardless of surrounding complexity. The journey that had begun with a simple request for simulator access had revealed family legacy, genetic advantages, and institutional investments that would shape Marcus's entire life. But at its heart remained a boy's desire to honor his father's memory through excellence that protected others, a purpose that transcended classification levels, security protocols, and institutional interests to touch the fundamental human need to contribute something meaningful to the world. The Wheeler family legacy lived on, stronger than ever, pointing toward true north with unwavering certainty that strategic brilliance in service to others represented the highest form of military excellence. Victory achieved through planning rather than combat, lives saved through intelligence rather than courage, peace preserved through preparation that made war unnecessary. Marcus Wheeler would carry that legacy forward, one strategic solution at a time, protecting those who would never know his name but would live safer lives because a quiet boy had inherited, developed, and chosen to employ capabilities that transformed military planning from brutal art into precise science. The story that had begun with dismissive laughter from General Pike concluded with international recognition of revolutionary strategic capabilities that would influence military thinking for generations. But for Marcus Wheeler, it was just the beginning of a lifetime of service that would honor the past while creating a future where strategic brilliance prevented the tragedies that previous generations had been forced to endure. True north remained constant, the brass compass pointed the way, and Marcus Wheeler, guided by inherited excellence and trained capability, would follow that direction wherever it led, knowing that his strategic gifts came with obligations that transcended personal preference but aligned with his deepest desire to protect and serve. The legacy continued, the future beckoned, and somewhere in whatever afterlife awaited military heroes, Colonel David Wheeler watched his son with pride that transcended death itself, knowing that the strategic excellence he had cultivated had found its perfect expression in a boy whose brilliance would save more lives than any battlefield courage ever could.